will not avoid those issues and individuals. As responsible broadcasters, we have an obligation to you, our viewers, to maintain a sense of objectivity and fairness, no matter how difficult the guest or the subject. Last week, Statewide Live and ETV appeared to take an advocacy position. That's inconsistent with our policy of fairness and balance. And for that, we apologize and offer our assurance that we'll continue to strive for fair and unbiased programming. For the many viewers who've written and phoned us about the program, please know we value your comments, as we do all suggestions for all of our programming. Thank you for watching. We'll continue our efforts to earn and maintain your trust and support.
An election year tax cut. Is it just politics? That's next on Statewide Live. Welcome to Statewide Live. I'm Patricia Murray. Tonight's topic, we ask this tough question. Is an election year tax cut just a political game? We've all seen over the past couple of weeks lawmakers debating whether we should have an income tax cut, a sales tax cut, or no tax cut at all. My guests tonight to talk about this issue have opposing views. They are Mike Garriga, Governor Fordyce's Chief of Staff, who's been pushing for an income tax cut, and State Representative Ed Blackmon, who doesn't want any tax cuts. Thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we begin our discussion on tax cuts, we'd like to hear from you, as always, on our statewide survey. The question is, which do you favor? An income tax cut, a sales tax cut, or no tax cut? Let us hear from you within the next 5 minutes. The toll-free number is 1-800-922-9698. We will have the results of the survey later in the show. Now let's begin our discussion. Mark, it's been said the governor's income tax cut proposal was just an election year gambit to get reelected. Wasn't it just a campaign gimmick, and isn't he just another tricky politician?
No, Kirk Fordyce has been in favor of tax cuts for Mississippians for a long time. As a matter of fact, in 1992, which was the first year that the governor was in office, he vetoed a sales tax increase that was passed by the legislature. And the legislature overrode his veto. So he was against sales tax increases in 92. In 93 and 94, he proposed income tax cuts. And finally, in 95, we came very close to cutting income taxes in Mississippi. So this is not something new for Kirk Fordyce.
Representative Blackmon, wasn't the governor's loss purely partisan politics the other day and just a means to a political end, that of neutralizing a Republican governor and not giving him a weapon to use against the Democratic opponent?
Well, you'd have to surmise that a little bit of that was in there, but I agree with Mark. He's been trying to do this and saying this for some time, and each time he said it, he's been wrong. I think the impetus to do it this year was greater because it would have been served him well as a politician who managed to get a tax cut through, even though it would have meant zero benefit for the recipients of it. So politics did have a role in it, and it was all over the place.
Who could benefit? How with the state fair, if we talk about a sales cut, how can you not support some kind of tax cut in the state of Mississippi?
Well, if you want to take away educational opportunities for your children, if you want to reduce health care to your citizens in this state, then I guess tax cut would be good. But I don't think there are many people out there who want to do that for the kind of tax cut that was being offered. We've already reduced in this state over the last 3 years educational expenditures from the general fund by a total of $160 million and a percentage of about 12%. So any tax cut would have necessarily meant a reduction in educational expenditures. And I don't think the population of the state of Mississippi is ready for that. And I don't believe the politicians who have been advocating that have told the Mississippi public that that would be the result of the tax cut.
Well, who is advocating this?
Well, I think politicians who want to fall in line with the governor, who might have been seeking to avoid an opponent in the election or to avoid an election year issue, were behind this. And I think the governor was following what the governor always has done. He wants to do this, and and other things. And his philosophy, and I've heard him say this, is let the chips fall where they may. And there are politicians who have that kind of philosophy out there.
Mark, some have said that Secretary of State Dick Malpass outmaneuvered the governor by coming up with a better tax cut of his own. Is that true?
Well, the governor asked the right question the other day in the Ways and Means Committee. He asked some supporters of Secretary of State Dick Malpass, where were they in 1992? You see, Dick Malpass and a lot of his supporters in 1992 raised sales taxes in Mississippi, and a lot of people haven't forgotten about that. And so when you ask the question, who's doing election year politics, you've got to ask yourself, a Secretary of State who wanted to raise taxes just 3 years ago suddenly comes up with a sales tax cut in 1995, coincidentally the same year he's running for governor. That sounds more like politics to me.
Is it true that after the income tax was defeated, the governor tried to lobby against a sales tax proposed by his Democratic rival? And isn't this sales tax cut better than no tax cut for all the people when you're thinking of everyone?
Well, actually, the Senate hasn't even voted on a sales tax cut. The House, and they've told us, a number of key committee chairmen over there have told us they don't want to consider a sales tax cut. That has nothing to do with the governor. And in the House, there's never been a really straight up and down vote on sales tax.
What's the feel in the House, Representative Blackmon?
Oh, first, let me say that 3 years ago, the last time I looked, Dick Malpass, the Secretary of State, didn't have a vote in the legislature, so he never had an opportunity to vote on the sales tax. I did, and I did vote for it. I reluctantly voted for it. But the take on the House side was that it was politics, naturally. You know, some people wanted to get one up on the governor, and there were some people who legitimately wanted to give a sales tax. But my position was that, hey, wait a minute. We need tax reform. We don't need a sales tax reduction either. We need sales reform that will benefit people in the long term.
Okay, the survey is now over. Please, no more calls. The statewide survey is now over, and we'll give you the results in just a few minutes. Aren't people in the state of Mississippi sick and tired of taxes? Don't we have some bigger issues to deal with? Crime, poverty, the infrastructure, dealing with building a competitive industrial environment. Don't we have some other serious issues that we should be concerned with rather than taxes?
I'd have to say that probably one of the most serious issues that faces the country this day in Mississippi and in the rest of the country is the level of taxation. It's right up there. Crime is incredibly important to the people out there, education and all those things. But taxation, the level of taxation is growing incrementally every single year in this country.
But aren't people more concerned about tax reform rather than...
Not necessarily. I think what they're concerned about is an incredibly high level of taxation. The average American works until May 5th right now to pay his or her state and local taxes. Mississippians fit right in there somewhere. Mississippi has one of the highest state and local taxation rates in the country. So it's happening. People out there are asking themselves, and they're asking politicians, how are you spending our tax money? And are you spending it wisely? Are we collecting enough, too much revenue for what we want to do in government? This is a really good debate. So taxes is the key to the debate, and I think it's one that should continue.
Okay, we have the results at this time of our survey. Income tax cut, 52%. Sales tax cut, 38%. No tax cut, 14%. How do you both respond to that?
Well, the governor must have worked well to get his people to call in. I personally did not have anybody call from my district to ask for a tax cut. This is politician generated and politician driven. The people who are asking for a tax cut, we need to tell them what kind of tax cut they get. We put some figures to the governor's proposed sales tax cut, and it came out to this. Those people who are being taxed currently in the 15% bracket would get $1.25 per week back next year. Those that are in the 30% plus would get $2.50 per week back. And that's no real benefit to our citizens. What could benefit the citizens is going after that nearly $1 billion in sales tax exemptions that we have. Now, I would ask the governor to join with those of us who want real tax reform, and let's reduce that $1 billion tax exemption that we have, sales tax exemption. Those are people who are in entities that don't pay any sales tax at all. They are riding on the backs of the average citizen right now. And some of these tax exemptions go back to the 40s, and they have no rhyme or reason for being continued right now. Mark, can't we get the governor to help us out on that?
Well, the interesting thing about the tax debate this year is a lot of people, and I think some of them have been more consistent than Ed has, who have popped up all of a sudden and said, let's do tax reform, or let's cut sales taxes. I mean, where have these people been the last 3 years in Mississippi?
Okay.
We've tried to
can we
get
just
that.
give the phone number out
Sure.
at this moment, and we'll open the lines and accept phone calls from you all across the state. The number is 1-800-922-9698. We're discussing the issue of taxes in Mississippi. Back to you, Mark.
Well, all of a sudden we're all talking about cuts, and really it's Kirk Fordyce, or the governor, who's been talking about cuts from the beginning, or restructuring the system from the beginning. So finally some people have come along to join the bandwagon. But I want to say this, a lot of that talk about tax reform is just a way to try to kill the governor's income tax reform. And that's what happened in the House of Representatives. The Senate had already passed it. And some members of the House, although a majority of the House favored the income tax cut, some members of the House tried to skirt around the issue by saying, well, let's take up something different.
One of the biggest concerns is that any kind of tax cut, anytime you're dealing with taxes, you're going to hurt one of the most important aspects of life in Mississippi, and that's education. Representative Blackmon mentioned that a few moments ago. Some people really want to know, is the governor concerned about our children?
Very much concerned. In fact, when people in Mississippi find out the facts about education, they're generally astounded. Like, for instance, that the education budget for the K through 12 increased from $500 million to over $1 billion from 85 to 95. You see, that's what we're talking about. The amount of education funding in Mississippi having actually been doubled in many respects in a 10-year period. And in some respects, that's good. But what the governor is just saying is that we need to look at our priorities. We're not necessarily going to have to cut any of these things. We're cutting the rate of growth of state government.
Well, you know, that's funny, because my figures show that in the last 3 years we reduced spending in education by $160 million. We've gone from a budget of spending from our general fund in the last 3 years of spending 63% of our general funds on education down to 52% now. With the governor's tax cut in 3 years, we will be spending 47%. I don't think that shows that we have a lot of the people who are proposing this are really concerned about making sure that our children can compete on a global scale.
We'll get back to that in just a second, Representative Blackmon. We have a caller on the line. Kenny, you're on the line. Kenny from Canton?
Yes, from Madison. Yeah, my question was to Representative Blackmon. I was wondering how any of the members of the legislature could face their constituents and not be in favor of some form of a tax cut when the legislature themselves gave themselves a large pay raise and voted all the state employees a pay raise. I agree with the other gentleman about the citizens are not so concerned about the level of taxation, but how that money is spent.
Representative Blackmon?
Well, you know, the results are there, that we've spent our money wisely over the last several years. I can't say that we've always done what's best for Mississippi, and we still may not be doing that. I would agree with the gentleman that the public ought to ask questions about how money is being spent. For instance, you talk about education, things that people don't think of, such as seat belts for school buses, which some of us have been advocating for years. It would cost $6,500,000 to equip school buses. We can't seem to get the money for that. We borrow every year through bonding monies for capital improvements in our educational institutions. Why do we have to have bond issues and borrow money and pay interest on that if we have so much money? I agree with him, and I've been one of the ones who's saying, hey, look, we need to spend our money a lot more wiser. Pay as we go is what I advocate.
Where is the money from the gambling industry going? What happened to the great tax base as a result of our gambling industry in the state of Mississippi?
Well, if you look at a chart from 1979, the time of the last tax cut, income tax cut in Mississippi, revenues in Mississippi have just gone straight up. In fact, they've probably about doubled or more than doubled in that time period. So the gaming revenue has helped, but it's not the whole story. It's probably.
So can we talk about the distribution of that revenue? Where has it gone? Let's hear of it.
Well, Ed made a good point. He said that a large percentage of that budget of what we spend in tax revenue goes to education, and it's true. It's somewhere, it hovers between the mid-50s to the mid-60s, depending on that year's budget. The total amount of money we're spending on education, though, is increasing rapidly every year. I don't know where Representative Blackmon is getting his figures about 160 million less. The numbers that I have seen, and I think that most people who are following this would agree with, show that education money is increasing exponentially every year. Seriously. So it's,
We'll let Representative Blackmon tell us where he got those figures. Just before we wanted to take a call from Amory, Mississippi. Tommy. Yes, Tommy?
Yes, ma'am. My question is very simple. I'd like to know, why does it always seem that the Republicans are always for a tax cut, which, of course, I'm in favor of,